Hello, my name is Tullbery, and I enjoy Halo 5. I have my issues with parts of the game, but I find every feature to be mostly enjoyable. Except one. There's one feature in Halo 5 that disappointed me on every single level. Unfortunately, it was also the one feature that I was most excited for. 3 years of waiting, and in retrospect, way too much hype, led to me being completely let down by Halo 5's campaign. Before I want to get into this, I just want to say, if you like the campaign, good for you. There is nothing I can say that can take away from your personal enjoyment of the game. However, it seems like a large majority of people weren't happy with the story. Now, I'm not the type of person to say since more people agree with me then I must be right, but this video will be criticizing what most people would say is wrong with Halo 5. Unfortunately, this video will be a mess. I found Halo 5's narrative to be bad, offensively bad, and coupled with a misleading marketing campaign, I'm upset about it. That said, I have tried to approach this objectively and assess the game fairly, without my emotions getting in the way. So let's start off by examining the campaign by itself. I'll leave the marketing out of it till later. I think it's important to start off by discussing the past Halo narratives. The original trilogy were games that focused on the player. Master Chief, our protagonist, was an empty shell so the player could be easily immersed into the world around them. While undercharacterizing the protagonist would be problematic in any other mediums, this is actually a very viable option for games. Rather than creating an emotional appeal by having the audience relate and connect with the characters, games directly involve the player into the game and allow him or her to develop their own emotional connections to the world. And this is exactly what the original Halo games did. Halo 4 marked a change in the type of stories that the Halo franchise would start telling. Rather than putting the player in the world, Halo 4 told a more traditional character story as it focused on the characters of Chief and Cortana. While I would understand if fans of the franchise found the sudden characterization of the Chief jarring in Halo 4, I absolutely loved it, and it resulted in the first Halo game to have a deeply emotional narrative.
She said that to me once. About being a machine.
I think the difference between these two types of storytelling can best be seen through the villains of each game. In the original trilogy, the Prophets and the Gravemind acted as main opposition to the player, and in Halo 4, the Chief is at odds with the Didact. The Prophets and the Gravemind are bad guys for very obvious reasons. They're both shown to be powerful, dangerous, and evil in obvious ways. The Didact, on the other hand, despite the game's lackluster presentation of this, has a somewhat understandable reason for hating humanity. Now, all of these villains work great in the context of their own games, but the differences between them just show the different types of stories they were in. Following Halo 4, Halo 5 once again tried to tell a story that focused on the characters. Well, at least that's what everyone expects, especially after ending Halo 4 with Chief in such an interesting emotional state. But instead of the strong characters of its predecessor, Halo 5 has some of the strangest characters I've ever seen. And I say strange not because the characters themselves are weird or uncomfortable, but because the development of the protagonist both exists and doesn't exist at the same time. The plot often hinges on the choices of the characters, but the game does a poor job of showing the player why the characters make those choices. That's a theme that will pop up a lot as I break down the story. The game starts off with an Osiris mission in which Locke, Buck, Tanaka, and Vale enter a war zone to rescue Dr. Halsey from Jewel and Dama because she has information about Forerunner attacks. Actually, no it doesn't. It starts off with a cinematic narrated by Halsey that is even more head-scratching and disconnected from the actual plot than Halo 4's intro. The first real cinematic starts with the mission debrief and ends with Fireteam Osiris descending a mountain in a large action sequence. As much as I appreciate the action, was this really the best way to introduce 3 new characters? I mean, we get to learn that Locke is the leader and see Nathan Fillion trying his best to make Buck charismatic with the lines he's given, but the dynamics of the team and the characters doesn't even get touched on. I know that throughout the game, characters will spurt dialogue about their backstories, such as Tanaka talking about her history on a glass planet and Vale learning about the Sangheili, which is passable, but I definitely feel there's a more creative and effective way to establish these characters. Regardless, I found it lazy to have the characters straight up spout exposition about themselves. So Halsey gets rescued and Osiris brings her back to Infinity, and Halsey then plays a pronoun game with Lasky, and the cutscene ends with Locke just straight up ignoring Buck.
What do you think that's about?
So yeah, we're off to a good start. Then the game introduces us to the other 4 protagonists, Blue Team, led by Master Chief. This mission is admittedly a lot better in introducing characters and their motivations. You can see the Chief shaking, clearly in distress over losing Cortana. The game even lets the player know that Blue Team formed during the Spartan 2 program. It's much more obvious that this group of Spartans are close, especially since Fred expresses concern over the Chief's mental state. Anyways, Blue Team is clearing the Argent Moon when Chief gets a vision from Cortana after being incapacitated. As awkward as the whole prophetic vision thing is, I do like how this continues to show the Chief's mental disarray. The mission ends with Blue Team requesting access to go search for Cortana. For an unknown reason, they're denied permission, and Chief decides to go AWOL in the most underwhelming way ever.
Negative infinity. I don't like it.
More on that later. Some say that this is a poor introduction to the iconic team for the lore, and I can mostly agree. I felt that it gave Chief good characterization, but should definitely have done more to show the Blue Team is like a family, instead of just saying it later on in an Osiris mission. So back on the Infinity, Lasky and crew discuss the news of Master Chief going AWOL, and were given the reason that the UNSC doesn't want the Chief to go find Cortana. Apparently, they already know that she's alive and evil, and Master Chief is too emotionally broken to avoid getting wrapped up in her plans. I have many problems with this. Once again, more on that later. Everyone assuming Cortana is evil makes Roland go on a rant, which makes no sense. While I understand his sympathy for another AI, if the UNSC already knows that Cortana is behind the Guardian attacks, then it should be clear to Roland that Cortana is, at the very least, worthy of suspicion. If the UNSC doesn't know that Cortana is behind the attacks, then Roland's anger does make sense, but then the Chief wouldn't have gone AWOL and the entire conversation wouldn't have happened. The worst part is that most players will actually think that Roland's outburst does make sense. The game hasn't shown us what the big deal is with the Guardians, so we, like Roland, don't see what's wrong with Cortana waking them up. But, as I'll explain later, the Guardians are a big deal and they need to be dangerous for the plot to have tension, but the game just doesn't show it well. Remember what I said about the characters being confusing? Following that logical disaster, we get the only scene in the game where Osiris' mission to stop Blue Team is actually put into question. While Locke seems almost indifferent about the orders, Buck has second thoughts.
Every other Spartan, every soldier, when they hear about this, they're gonna hate us. You know that, right?
And after this, nothing. Even though I ultimately think Buck's line was meaningful, I feel that there are once again much better ways to convey the same idea, or at least support it. It comes down to the show don't tell argument. It would have been much more emotionally effective if we saw other soldiers actually angry about the orders, rather than Buck just saying that everyone will hate them. Anyways, the next couple of missions involve Osiris following Blue Team's trail on Meridian, which takes him to the Guardian, where they first meet the Warden, the game's passable but boring secondary villain. After fighting him, Osiris runs into Blue Team at the entrance to the Guardian, in one of the most important cutscenes in the game. Locke orders Blue Team to surrender, but Fred, Kelly, and Linda all enter the Guardian. As Chief is about to leave, Locke makes a comment about Cortana that pisses Chief off enough to engage in a pretty underwhelming fight. I think what's most interesting about the scene is the fact that the rest of Osiris just sit and watch. Is this them being apprehensive to try and stop the Chief? If so, that would actually be interesting to see, but the game doesn't even cut away from the fight to show their body language or reaction. This is either an important character moment that is way too subtle, or the cinematic director just didn't know what to do with the other three Spartans in the scene. Once again, the game fails to show relevant character moments. Of course, Chief wins the fight, and he enters the Guardian as Osiris is forced to flee the planet as the Guardian wakes up. The entire following mission is a missed opportunity. This was the one point in the game where the absolute destruction of the Guardians could be completely shown, but once again, a major plot point is completely underplayed. There are a few points in the mission where the player can actually see injured soldiers, and there's an effective radio transmission sequence, but that's it. The game doesn't do nearly enough to portray the Guardians as a real threat. Osiris makes it out and the cutscene ends. We don't get to see the aftermath, we don't get to see the people on Meridian getting killed. Not that there needs to be some graphic violence, I mean, look at this old Halo 5 ad. Even something like this would work. The game does a horrible job at portraying the Guardians as real threats because it refuses to show how damaging they are to humanity. The second Blue Team mission takes us to Genesis, the Forerunner installation where the Guardians are being called to. In this mission, Blue Team contacts Cortana over radio. Yes, the reveal of Cortana being alive occurs through an in-game dialogue sequence between combat sections. Anyways, this mission once again fails to make sense. Why does Blue Team have to fight Forerunner forces? Yes, the Warden is in control of the Prometheans, but Cortana literally disintegrates a whole herd of Wardens later, so why can't she just stop the Warden now? I know she wants to know if she can still trust Blue Team, but it seems like a pretty risky trust fall. As the mission goes on, Blue Team develops a bit of suspicion about Cortana. How this suspicion is handled, in my opinion, completely disrupts the intended character arc of the Chief, but more on that later. Meanwhile, Osiris and the Infinity Crew decide to go to St. Helios to intercept the Guardian there. In the cutscene leading up to Osiris' departure, we learn that Locke used to work for Oni and even volunteered to assassinate the Arbiter. This is pretty much the only real look into Locke's past that we get in the game, and it sets up an interesting dynamic with the Arbiter, which doesn't really go anywhere past their first conversation. So Osiris goes to St. Helios and meet up with the Arbiter. Let's talk about the Arbiter. First of all, what happened? Second, the Arbiter is completely underutilized in the story. Not only was he a fan-favorite character who was in the marketing, but he has more of a reason to be involved with finding the Chief than anyone on Fireteam Osiris. Think about it. The Arbiter fought alongside Chief during Halo 3 when Chief lost Cortana. He witnessed the distress that put the Chief under, and even went into high charity to help rescue her. He not only shares a close relationship with Chief, but also would have pretty valuable insight for the UNSC. Instead of being a relevant figure in the plot, the Arbiter has a pretty inconsequential role in Halo 5 that almost feels shoehorned in. The story certainly wouldn't need the Arbiter, but if they wanted to include him, they should have actually used him. Anyways, Osiris makes their way onto the Guardian and reach Genesis. There, they race to find the Chief before he reaches Cortana. And they meet Exuberant Witness, and as far as redeemable qualities go, she's definitely one of them. When Osiris finally catches up to Blue Team, they quickly realize that they both know something is wrong with Cortana. Before they can do anything, Cortana teleports Blue Team closer to her. But not the entire way, because plot. The next mission is the last Blue Team mission, and boy, I hate this mission. Throughout the mission, Blue Team becomes very suspicious of Cortana, and they question the repercussions of her plan. The game assumes that this in-game dialogue will suffice for the turn in Chief's character arc. More on that later, but once again, it is told rather than shown. Not only is it the worst as far as gameplay goes, but this mission's closing cutscene is a spit in the face to longtime fans of the franchise. After making Warden disappear with a single touch, Cortana tries to explain herself. Her entire plan, her entire role as a villain, is so cliche and uninspired that this really pushed Halo 5's narrative off the edge for me. Her plan is to use the Guardians as a gun to the head as she enforces peace in the galaxy. Not only is this evil AI plan a genre trope, but it's not threatening. Like I said earlier, the game doesn't properly show how powerful the Guardians are. This saps attention from the game, and it makes Cortana seem like an even less threatening villain. Chief tries to talk Cortana down in a conversation that is trying so hard to have the emotional impact of Halo 4's ending, but it doesn't work, and Blue Team gets put in Krypton, requiring Osiris to free them in the game's last mission. The entire third act of this game feels like it's only trying to set up Halo 6 and not wrap up Halo 5. Admittedly, that may be because of the first two acts having no real weight to them, but it doesn't make me forget how unsatisfying the ending of this game was. After seeing Osiris get Blue Team out of the Krypton, we see Earth getting attacked by a Guardian, and in the sad twist of fate, the cliffhanger we are left on is the only time in the game where the Guardians seem remotely threatening. With another pretty inconsequential scene, the game ends, and that's it. That's Halo 5's plot. Now that I broke it down, I want to focus on the characters specifically. First up, we got our newcomer Spartan Locke. Now, this guy is a boring character. The game wants us to see him as this ex-Oni Spartan who follows orders, no questions asked. And for the most part, he is. But we never get why he's like that. Now, I want to leave lore out of this, but even Halo Nightfall didn't answer this for me. I get the fact that some people are very strict and will always do what they're told, but his character would have been much more compelling if we had an understanding as to why he's like that. Take this line.
You're okay with this? Not just another target, you know.
Every target is just another target, Buck.
He isn't even apprehensive about stopping the guy who saved the world like 4 times. Maybe that's just his character, but I would prefer if he had a backstory that explained why he's like that in an emotionally relatable way. As for the rest of Osiris, they're all interesting characters on paper and even have some charismatic moments, but for the most part, they're sidelined from development and mainly serve to spout exposition. To be fair, Locke and Osiris aren't really the focus of Halo 5. Even though they take up 80% of the game, it's Chief and Blue Team that have the narrative focus. Locke doesn't really need a huge character arc, but regardless, it would have been much appreciated to see him change meaningfully as the story progressed, at least a little bit. I mean, what if he started off without much respect for Spartan-2s? He sees them as Oni abominations created to keep humanity in check, and as the game progresses, he develops respect for the Chief and realizes that he isn't just some machine built to follow orders. Hey, wait a minute. That's actually relevant to the story of Halo 4 and makes a good parallel to Halo 5. Now let's talk about the Chief, the poster boy for the franchise. Unlike Locke, he had an actual character arc in Halo 5. Unfortunately, this arc became uninteresting after his first mission. In his first mission, we see how emotionally broken the Chief is. This pretty much stops after that. In the second Blue Team mission, Master Chief starts questioning Cortana. It would have been so much more interesting if he didn't accept that Cortana was evil until the end of the game. Consider this. The Master Chief spends the majority of the game hunting down Cortana, but once he sees firsthand the destruction she is causing, he turns against her. And I'm not talking about Fred mentioning civilian casualties in an elevator. I mean Chief is actually on the ground watching the Guardians destroy civilization. I would have respected Halo 5 so much if they had chosen to let Master Chief do morally ambiguous things in search of Cortana. People would certainly be mad about it, but it would have made his character arc so much more emotionally investing. What if Master Chief not only rode a Guardian to Genesis, but intentionally activated one? This not only would have made his character arc more interesting, but it would validate the marketing of the game in which we were told Chief would be a traitor. I think it would be even more effective if we didn't know Cortana was alive until the end of the game. Although I think Cortana being evil is stupid, if that's the road we're going to take, it should at least be done well. The fact that the game lets the player know that Cortana is alive less than an hour in forces the narrative to make big events less exciting. Think about it. Instead of Chief becoming a traitor because he activated a Guardian out of hope that Cortana is still alive, he becomes a traitor because he goes to Meridian after being told no. Both result in the same outcome, but one involves a much more interesting arc for the Chief. Also, if Cortana wasn't revealed to be alive so early, the marketing would have actually been relevant, as there would be a hunt for the truth. Speaking of the marketing, let's talk about it. Now, I'm not over-exaggerating when I say that Halo 5 is the best marketing of any Halo game to date, in my opinion. It was so impressive what they were able to do. I remember that they revealed the live-action trailers during The Walking Dead, and I had friends who don't even play Halo tell me that they thought the ads were cool. We got Hunt the Truth, which was incredible, and 2 more live-action trailers, but almost none of it was actually relevant. The game was advertised to be a big showdown between the Chief and Locke, but it really wasn't. The two are actually at odds for maybe one cutscene, that's it. Hunt the Truth was only indirectly relevant, but I can forgive it because it's interesting as a standalone entity. Chief never goes into a desert with a robot, Locke never looks into Chief's past with the Arbiter, Master Chief never dies in the game, and Locke and Chief never do whatever this is. Even thematically, the ads don't represent the actual narrative. There have been some theories that these ads actually showcase part of Halo 6, but I fail to see how that makes it any better. I think that Halo 5 was ridiculously close to being a good story. There are a few small plot points that, had they been different, would have made the game significantly better. These suggestions I have for the narrative don't fix everything, but they would fix most of my issues with the game. As it stands right now, the game barely even makes sense. Important decisions made by characters are fueled by development that the characters don't have. The Chief rejects Cortana because he realizes that the Guardians are killing everybody, but the player is never shown how he comes to this conclusion. When the plot points depend on the internal development of the characters, but the game does a terrible job at showing this development without blatantly spouting it out in expositional in-game dialogue, you get a bad story. Oh, that was a long sentence. I was going to talk about the gameplay and level design, but I don't really think I can say anything new. I mean, what else is there to say? The level design was much more open than Halo 4, the Warden was in the game too often, and the AI squad sucks. In a strange way, despite the improvements from Halo 4's gameplay, I'll probably never willingly play through Halo 5's campaign again. I think the story just killed the experience for me. In conclusion, despite having decent improvement in the gameplay department, Halo 5 was multiple steps backward as far as narrative. I was so disappointed by Halo 5, especially following Halo 4's narrative. As much as I love the Bungie campaigns, Halo 4 really blew me away by examining a character that I grew up with in a new way. And I got hooked. I want to see where the Chief story goes, and I want a story to hit the emotional note that Halo 4 reached. I really hope I don't come across as somebody who just doesn't like the type of stories that 343 wants to tell. It's just painful to see developers fail at doing something they've already done so successfully, but I have hope that Halo 6 will be a better story. Until then, all we can do is discuss what went wrong, so 343 can learn how to improve. Thanks for watching.
Return to Infinity immediately.
Negative Infinity. I don't like it.
Let's make a good jump like we mean to. And handle fools like we need to.
Oh my god! Oh jeez, oh my god!
Focus fire. Focus fire.
With the right music, nothing even needs to actually happen.
Maybe we can jump.
Woo!